The saloon reeked of sour whiskey, rain-soaked dust, and men who hadn't seen decency in weeks. Thunder crawled across the plains like a warning nobody planned to heed. Inside, the lantern light flickered against warped wood and harder eyes. Three girls stood barefoot atop a crate near the back wall. No rope held them there, but silence did. Taught young that quiet was safer than defiance. Joelle Rayner, the eldest, had blood dried at the corner of her mouth. She held her chin high anyway, torn sleeves slipping off one shoulder like they no longer belonged to her. Beside her, Lena gripped the hand of their youngest sister, Martha, who stared wide-eyed at the crowd, too young to understand the full weight of being bought. Men chuckled, mugs slammed, a coin flipped into the air. That's when the door burst open. Rain slashed sideways through the frame. A tall figure stood in the storm, coat soaked, hat brim low, silver glinting at his side. He said nothing, just stepped forward and dropped a heavy pouch to the floor. "You'll let them go," said Jack Hale. And for the first time that night, the room forgot how to laugh. Jack Hale didn't speak much. He never had to. After he dropped the pouch of silver on the saloon floor, silence took hold of the room like a noose tightening. Every boot shifted a half step back. Even the man with the gold tooth stopped mid-swallow, his laughter dying on his tongue. The saloon keeper squinted through the lamplight. "Now hold on," he blustered. "You can't just walk in here." "I can," Jack said simply, "and I just did." His voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of gunmetal and old storms. He stepped closer to the platform where the girls stood. His eyes met Joelle's, sharp blue under the shadow of his hat. She didn't flinch, didn't drop her chin, but something in her tightened. "You're not buying," she said, daring him. "No," he answered, "I'm stopping the sale." The room cracked open with uneasy chuckles, but no one stepped forward. Not after Jack unholstered his revolver with a fluid, silent motion that said he'd done it more times than he cared to count. He didn't aim it, just let it rest at his side. One man near the bar made a move for his belt. Jack didn't warn him. He just shot the pistol clean out of the man's hand. The crack echoed like judgment. The man screamed, gripping his wrist, blood trickling through his fingers. "Anyone else want to speak for girls that ain't theirs?" Jack asked, calm as dawn. No one answered. The saloon keeper, now pale as dust, lifted both hands. "I didn't know. I was just holding them till—" Jack's eyes flicked toward the ledger. "This says otherwise." He reached into his coat again, this time not for a gun, but for a folded paper, edges curled and smudged. He tossed it on the bar. "The circuit judge in Dry Fork wrote that," he said. "Said he heard wind of girls being sold like mules. Gave me the right to stop it." The saloon keeper didn't even touch the paper. "You forged that." Jack stepped forward, slow, steady. "Then go tell the marshal or the judge. But know this, if anyone follows me, I'll take it as a threat." He turned to the girls. "You got names?" he asked again. Joelle stared at him. Her lip bled anew where she'd bitten it. "Names won't change what's been done. They might change what comes next." She looked past him, to the door, to the rain, to the road she'd never taken. "Joelle," she said, "my sisters are Lena and Martha." Jack nodded. "Come on, then." They stepped down slowly, Lena still clutching Martha's hand like it was the last thing tethering her to the earth. As they passed the saloon keeper, Joel spit near his boot. Not on it, just close enough to mean something. Outside, the storm had slowed to a mist, but the wind still carried weight. Jack helped Martha onto the back of his horse. No saddle, just a wool blanket. "It's a ways yet," he said. "You'll ride. The rest we walk." Joel eyed him. "You don't even know us." "No," he said, adjusting his coat. "But I know what men do when nobody stops them." They left the saloon behind, a broken place full of heavy eyes and empty laughter, dust and old sins. The doors creaked shut behind them like the last word of a bad story. For the first few miles, no one spoke. Lena's feet bled inside her shoes, but she didn't complain. Joelle walked beside Jack, silent, observant. Martha sat quietly atop the horse, the mist clinging to her lashes like frost. They walked until the lights of the town faded and the sky stretched wide and open above them. Coyotes howled once in the distance and Lena flinched, but Jack didn't turn his head. He just kept walking, steady as the wind. At some point, Joelle asked, "Where are we going?" Jack answered without looking back. "Home. Yours," she asked. He nodded. "And if we say no?" He stopped then, turned. "You're free to go any direction you choose, but there's nothing west but rock and nothing east for 2 days but crows." He didn't sound angry, just truthful. "You can rest a while at my place, heal up, then go if you want, or stay if you choose." "Why are you doing this?" Joelle asked. He looked at her then, really looked. "Because someone should have done it before me." They didn't argue after that. The house came into view just before midnight, a modest ranch tucked low against a hill, sagging porch, empty windows, no smoke from the chimney. Jack dismounted, lifted Martha gently from the horse, and led them inside. The floor creaked beneath their steps. One lantern burned low near the hearth. "You can sleep by the fire," he said. "It's clean." "What about you?" Lena asked, her voice the smallest. "I'll be at the door," he said, settling into the corner, rifle resting across his knees. They didn't thank him, didn't trust him. Not yet. But when Joelle laid her head down, she didn't keep one eye open. That was new. In the morning, Jack was gone. Joelle sat up fast, panic flickering through her chest. But before she could rise, the door opened. Jack stepped in, arms full, tin of milk, dry bread, a handful of apples that still held the chill of early light. "Eat," he said. They did. Lena tore into the bread like it might vanish. Martha ate slow, like she was trying to make it last forever. Jack opened the shutters and light poured in. Flat and gold, soft on everything it touched. The house was simple, empty. One photo on the wall, old and cracked. A woman with laughing eyes beside a man in uniform. "That your wife?" Joelle asked later. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he went out and began working on the broken fence. By evening, the girls had washed. Lena swept the porch. Martha found a single chicken pecking behind the barn and gave it a name, Dot. Joelle watched from the window as Jack hammered a new board into place. He didn't look up, didn't expect anything in return. And maybe that's what made her step outside. "Why didn't you ask our last name?" she asked. He paused, set the hammer down. "Didn't seem like it was mine to ask." She studied him. "It's Rayner. Ours, not his." Jack nodded. Then, almost too quiet to hear, Joelle said, "And yours?" "Hale." She blinked. "Jack Hale?" He nodded again. "Men used to tell stories about you. Gunslinger, tracker, ghost." He shrugged. "Used to be. Now I just fix fences." She stepped off the porch. "Well, Mr. Hale, thanks for not looking away." He said nothing, just picked up the hammer again. But his hands didn't shake, and neither did hers. The next few mornings came and went like pages, turning in a book none of them trusted yet. Jack didn't ask questions. He didn't touch them, didn't hover. He fixed things, shutters, fence rails, the loose barn door that creaked too loud at night. And when he wasn't working, he was either out riding the fence line or sitting on the porch with his rifle balanced across his knees, quiet as dusk. Inside, the girls began to unfold. Lena found a book on a shelf that still had dust clinging to its spine. She read it aloud in halting phrases while Martha braided her hair with blades of grass. Joelle kept close to the window, always watching the horizon, as if expecting something, someone, to appear. On the fourth day, she asked Jack, "You always this quiet or just with us?" He didn't look up from the saddle strap he was oiling. "Only speak when something needs saying." "Funny," she muttered. "The last man who said that ended up saying too much with his fists." Jack didn't answer, just kept working. Later, while chopping firewood, Joelle noticed the way he grunted when he swung, tight in the ribs. She stepped closer, arms crossed. "You got an injury?" Jack paused, gave her a sidelong glance. "Old one. From what?" "Does it matter?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Guess not." That night, Jack laid out bedrolls for them near the hearth. He didn't sleep in his own bedroom, not since they'd arrived. Instead, he sat by the door like a sentinel, back to the wall, always listening. Martha whispered once in the dark, "Does he ever sleep?" Lena replied, "I think he only rests when the house does." A week in, the rhythms began to change. Jack brought home a coop of half-wild hens, and showed Lena how to collect the eggs without getting pecked. Joel repaired one of the front steps using scrap boards from the barn. Even Martha began to hum when she swept, quiet and careful. They still jumped at sudden sounds, still paused when Jack moved too fast. But the house, this house, had no locks on the doors, and that alone was something none of them had ever known. One morning, Joelle stepped outside to find Jack carving a small wooden post. Not for the fence, too short. She narrowed her eyes. "What's that for?" Jack looked up. "Grave marker." Her stomach twisted. "For who?" He pointed to the tree line. "Found a calf half-eaten by coyotes. Buried it. Seems wrong not to mark it." She blinked. "You bury your animals?" "Only the ones that deserve better." She stood there a while, not saying anything, then asked, "Did you bury someone else out here?" He set the carving knife down. "Wife, long time ago. Daughter, too." Joelle didn't ask what happened. She just sat beside him and said, "Ours died one at a time." Later that day, Jack rode into town alone. Said he needed nails, flour, maybe another blanket. Joelle didn't trust it. "Why just you?" she asked. "Why not take one of us?" Jack tilted his head. "Would you?" She didn't answer. He handed her the rifle. "If anyone knocks and I'm not back yet, you answer with this." "Safety's on?" "No safety," he said. "Just sense." She watched him ride off until he disappeared behind the ridge. The house felt different without him. Quieter, but not safer. That afternoon, Lena found a bundle in the barn wrapped in oilcloth. Inside, letters, a photograph, and a medal shaped like a star. Joelle unfolded one letter and read the words out loud. "To Corporal Jack Hale, for courage under fire, and the rescue of 12 civilians behind enemy lines." She stopped reading. "Why would he hide this?" Lena asked. Joelle refolded the letter carefully. "Because some men don't need the world to clap when they've done right." Jack returned after sundown, bruised along one cheekbone but walking steady. He didn't offer explanation. Joelle didn't ask, but she noticed the paper-wrapped packages under his arm, 2 pairs of new boots, a tin of hard candy, and a comb carved from bone. "For what it's worth, he said that night, "you don't owe me anything." Joelle looked at him a long time before replying. "We know." And for the first time since arriving, she smiled. Just barely. But it counted. Jack returned late that evening with a sack of feed, 2 sharpened hoes, and a quiet tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Joelle saw it first. He moved slower, like he was listening to something only he could hear. "What happened in town?" she asked. Jack set the feed down without looking up. "Nothing yet." "Yet?" He finally met her eyes. "Someone asked if I'd seen 3 girls traveling alone." Joelle stiffened. "And?" "I didn't answer." She crossed her arms. "What name did they give?" Jack hesitated. "Taggart. Roy Taggart." The air changed. Lena, standing near the hearth, dropped a spoon into the stew pot. It clattered too loud for such a small sound. Joelle stepped back, voice quiet. "He's looking?" Jack nodded. "Or someone's asking on his behalf." Outside, the wind had picked up, scraping along the eaves like claws. Martha crept to Joelle's side and grabbed her skirt, face pale. "Who is he to you?" Jack asked. Joelle didn't answer right away. Then, "Used to be our stepfather. After Mama died, he sold our name to settle his own debts." Jack's jaw tensed. "He sell more than that?" Joelle's silence said enough. Jack looked to the fire, then to the door. "You're safe here," Lena whispered. "Are we?" Jack stepped outside without another word. They heard him loading the rifle. That night, no one slept well. Joelle sat by the window, knife in hand, watching shadows dance under moonlight. Jack paced the porch. Once, just before dawn, Martha padded quietly over and curled up beside him. He didn't move her, just shifted his coat to cover her shoulders. By morning, Jack was splitting wood like the devil owed him kindling. Each strike echoed through the valley. Lena gathered eggs in silence. Joelle hauled water. No one spoke of the name that now hovered like smoke in every corner of the house. But it changed things. Trust, which had been inching forward like a cautious animal, froze in place. Joelle kept a satchel near the door, just in case. Lena slept with her boots on. Martha drew pictures in the dust with her finger, One of them was a stick-figure man with big hands and no face. At supper, Jack spoke. If he comes, he won't take you. Joel looked up sharply. You can't promise that. I don't make promises, he said, but I don't bluff either. Lena whispered, what if he brings the law? Jack reached into his coat and laid the folded paper from the circuit judge on the table. This still holds weight. Joelle read it again. She had already memorized every word. Some men don't care about paper, she said. Jack nodded. Then we give them something else to care about. 3 days passed with no sign of trouble, but tension wrapped the house like barbed wire. Jack reinforced the fence. He moved the girl's sleeping spot farther from the windows. A second rifle appeared above the hearth, cleaned and ready. One morning, while Jack was in the barn, a rider came. Not Roy. A boy, no more than 17, dust-covered and wide-eyed, reined in near the porch. Joelle answered the door with the knife behind her back. The boy tipped his hat. Message for a Mr. Hale. She didn't move. He ain't here. I can wait. Jack stepped out from the barn, hands empty, but shoulders square. You just did, the boy swallowed. I was paid to deliver this. He handed over a sealed envelope. Jack opened it slowly. Inside, a single line scrawled in ink. You took what's mine. I'm coming to collect. RT. The paper burned easily in the stove. Joelle didn't ask what it said. She saw it in Jack's eyes. That night, while Joelle swept the porch, Jack sat sharpening a blade. He didn't glance up when she asked, You ever killed a man, Jack? Yes. She nodded slowly. Will you do it again? He met her eyes then. Something old and sorrowful in his gaze. If I have to. They spent the next morning boarding up the east-facing windows. Jack worked in silence, hammer in hand, jaw set like a man preparing for a storm he knew was coming. Lena stood nearby, handing him nails from an old tobacco tin. She didn't speak much, but her eyes never stopped scanning the tree line. Joelle sat at the table, oiling the rifle like he'd shown her. She moved slow, deliberate, the way Jack did. No wasted motion. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing faint scars. The kind only someone who'd seen too much too young would recognize. You think he'll come soon? Lena asked. Jack answered without turning from the window. Men like him don't wait long. Joelle wiped the barrel clean. Then let him. Jack turned. Number, we don't invite war, but we don't run from it either. Outside, the wind howled through the cottonwoods like a warning. The air carried that faint scent of scorched grass, summer fire, maybe a lightning strike far off. Jack had smelled it before. So had Joelle. It reminded them both. Some things burn slow before they break wide open. That night, after the girls had bedded down, Joelle stepped onto the porch where Jack sat with his rifle across his lap, staring into nothing. He hurt Lena, she said quietly. Jack didn't move. He never laid a hand on me, said I was too old, too bitter. But Lena, she was the one who kept quiet, the one who obeyed. That made her the perfect target. Jack said nothing, just tightened his grip on the rifle. I used to pray he'd leave us, or die, or get lost in a card game and never come back. But he always did. Always. She exhaled hard. We were just trying to get away when they caught us and dragged us to that saloon. Said we owed too much. Said we were wasted goods but still worth something. Jack's voice came slow. And Martha? Never touched her. She was too small, but she saw everything. That's worse. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was heavy, grounded. Jack finally said, You don't owe me this story. I'm not telling it for you, she replied. I'm telling it for me. Then, as if brushing dust from an old wound, she added, We were just 3 girls and no name. That's all we were. Until now. The next morning, Jack found Lena in the barn, staring at the broken wagon that hadn't moved in years. She looked up, dirt smudged on her cheek. I want to help, she said. You are. I want to shoot. Jack paused. You ever held a pistol? She nodded. Once. Didn't like it. He knelt, opened a case, and pulled out a small, well-balanced revolver. This one's lighter. You'll feel it kick, but not enough to knock you over. We'll practice behind the barn. Lena nodded, not scared. You don't have to be brave to shoot, Jack said. You just have to want to protect something. She looked at him, eyes wide and unwavering. I do. Meanwhile, Joelle rode out to the creek. The sky was the color of hammered tin, clouds threatening rain that wouldn't come. She knelt at the water's edge, splashing her face, staring into the glassy surface. Behind her, hoofbeats approached. She turned sharply, hand on her belt, only to find Reverend Pike, his old gelding, loping slow behind him. He lifted a hand in greeting. Miss Rayner, he said kindly. Reverend, I stopped by Jack's. He said you were down here. Thought I'd check on you. Joelle straightened. We're fine. I heard from the telegraph operator in Dry Fork. Word spreading. Taggart's been asking around with coin in hand and a badge on his belt. Joelle's brow furrowed. Badge? Deputized himself, far as I can tell. Friends in all the wrong places. She clenched her fists. So that paper from the judge means nothing? Oh, it means something, the Reverend said. But men like Taggart don't care about papers. They care about ownership. They care about pride. Joelle's voice was sharp. He doesn't own us. No, Reverend Pike said. But he thinks he does. And that makes him dangerous. Back at the house, Martha helped Jack mend the chicken wire. She didn't say much, but Jack noticed how she no longer jumped when the hammer struck. That was something. After supper, they all sat on the porch. No one asked why. Jack passed around slices of hard cheese and dried apple. The sky turned to bruised purple, stars prickling into view. Joelle leaned against the post, arms crossed. You ever had a family, Jack? He looked down. Once. What happened? He was quiet a long time. She died in childbirth. Our daughter lasted a week. I built this house for them, then boarded it up. Thought it was too quiet to live in again. Joelle's voice was gentle. It's not quiet anymore. No, he agreed. It's not. She looked over at Martha, who had fallen asleep with her head in Lena's lap. You think we can really stay? Jack looked toward the dark horizon. We'll find out soon enough. They heard the horses before they saw the men. Mid-morning brought a dry wind, scattering dust through the cottonwoods and rustling the fence line. Jack paused mid-swing at the chopping block, axe frozen in the air. Joelle stepped onto the porch, eyes narrowing toward the trail beyond the ridge. A cloud of riders, 4, no 5. One at the front wore a brown duster, clean-shaven jaw, and a cruel kind of grin that came easy. His horse was black, his hat too wide, his presence unmistakable. Roy Taggart. Lena saw them too. She grabbed Martha's hand and bolted back inside the house. Jack didn't move, didn't shout, just turned and walked toward the porch, steady as sunrise. Joelle reached for the rifle by the door. Her hands didn't shake this time. The riders came slow, deliberate, a show. When they stopped in front of the house, Roy tipped his hat with the flair of a stage actor. Well now, he drawled, ain't this the prettiest little hiding spot I ever laid eyes on? Jack stood at the edge of the porch, feet planted. You've got no business here. Roy smiled wider. That's so? Far as I'm concerned, I'm here to reclaim what was stolen. No one here belongs to you. That's where you're wrong, Roy said, glancing past Jack. A man signs a contract, pays off some debts, feeds some mouths. What's that if not ownership? Joelle stepped forward, voice flat. We ain't property. Roy's grin faded slightly. And yet I recall you singing a different tune when I was keeping your belly full. Joelle raised the rifle. Jack placed a steady hand over hers, not to stop her, but to remind her she wasn't alone. You're trespassing, Jack said. You got until I count to 3. Roy tilted his head, feigning hurt. Come now, Hale. You think this ends in a shootout? I've got papers, signatures. Sheriff in Dry Fork said he'd ride with me if I need him. Jack's voice was low. You bring that sheriff, I'll show him the scars on those girls. I'll show him the letter from Judge Randall. And if none of that matters, well, we'll still be standing. Roy's eyes narrowed. I always did hate a righteous man. Jack said nothing. You think you're going to raise them like they're yours? Feed them? Clothe them? Roy spat. What makes you think they'd choose you? Joelle stepped forward. Because he didn't leave bruises. Silence. Roy's men shifted in their saddles. The tension was a coiled snake now, waiting for the strike. Then Jack said, clear and slow, You've got until 3, Roy sneered. You're bluffing. 1, the wind picked up. 2, Joelle raised the rifle again. This time Jack didn't stop her. Roy pulled his reins. This ain't over, Hale. You think one good man can change what they are? Girls like that. Joelle fired. The bullet hit the dirt just inches from Roy's horse. He flinched. Jack didn't. Roy cursed, yanked the reins hard. His men turned. They rode out fast, dust kicking up in clouds behind them. Joelle stood frozen, heart pounding. Jack reached for her rifle and gently lowered it. You did right. I didn't mean to miss, she muttered. Jack gave a small, grim smile. I know. That night the house was quieter than usual. Not afraid, just drained. Martha clung to Lena, who sang a lullaby off-key. Joelle sat on the porch with her boots off, staring at the moon. Jack joined her after a while, carrying 2 cups of lukewarm coffee. She accepted one. Think he'll come back? Jack nodded. With more men, maybe with that sheriff. You scared? Used to be. Now I'm just ready. Joelle looked at him. Why do this? Why not just turn us away? Jack sipped his coffee, watching the stars. Because someone turned me away once. Didn't even ask my name. I figured the world didn't need another man doing the same. She studied him a long moment. You're not just keeping us safe, Jack. No? You're building something. Jack looked toward the barn, the mended fence, the girls inside the house. Maybe I am. They came just after dawn. 5 riders this time. No dust cloud, no warning. Just hooves cutting through frost-bitten grass and the sour stench of power riding in beside them. At the front was Roy Taggart again, face set and humorless now. To his right rode a man in a long coat with a tin star pinned crooked on his chest. Sheriff from Dry Fork, Jack muttered as he spotted the badge. Joelle stood beside him on the porch. Her hands were steady. She wore a revolver at her hip now, one Jack had taught her to draw without flinching. Behind them, Lena peered through the front window, rifle loaded. Martha sat on the floor with a tin cup, whispering stories to herself that only she could hear. Roy dismounted and approached like a man who thought the world still answered to him. Got law with me now, he said. You gonna shoot a badge too, girl? The sheriff stepped forward, eyes flicking between Joelle and Jack. Mr. Hale, you understand this man has signed claims of legal guardianship, contractual obligation, debts unsettled. Jack held up the letter from Judge Randall, sealed and signed. This overrules your Dry Fork Inc. Circuit authority. You want to argue it, take it to Fort Barker. The sheriff hesitated, chewing his lip. Roy growled, What's there to argue? These girls were mine to begin with. They ran, stole from me. Joelle stepped off the porch. Say that again, she said. Roy turned. You heard me. I did, but I want your men to hear it too, so they know what kind of man they ride with. Silence. You fed us, sure, Joelle said, but you used us up like tools. And when we broke, you traded us like mules. That ain't guardianship. That's slavery with paperwork. Roy's hand twitched toward his hip. Jack's voice came like thunder. Don't. The tension shattered. Roy drew. So did Jack. So did Joelle. 2 gunshots cracked like whiplash. Roy stumbled backward, blood spreading across his coat. His pistol hit the dirt, untouched. The sheriff dove behind his horse. The other men reeled, unsure. One dropped his reins and fled. Another raised his hands, the third turned and bolted. Jack stepped forward. You all ride back to Dry Fork. Say whatever you want, but you say it far from here. The sheriff emerged, hands raised. No quarrel with me, Hale. This man's been trouble since before he wore a badge. Jack nodded once. Roy gasped for air, knees hitting the dirt. Joelle stepped closer, standing over him. You never broke us, she said softly. You just taught us how to fight. He died before she could say more. That night they burned his badge. Joelle tossed it into the fire, watching it curl and twist in the flames. The air outside smelled of pine smoke and new earth. The grave Jack dug for Roy was shallow, unmarked, and far from the others. Reverend Pike arrived the next day. He said nothing about the blood, just brought flour, tea, and a spool of thread. Thought you might be needing more than bullets now, he said with a tired smile. Joelle hugged him. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in years. Weeks passed. then months. Jack finished rebuilding the south fence. Lena planted a small garden. Martha began school, escorted each morning by Miss Madden, who brought her books in gentle patience. Joelle sanded down the porch railings and carved something into the beam beside the door. Rayner House. Jack saw it one evening. He didn't say a word, but later when she brought him coffee, he rested his hand over hers for the first time. Not in protection, not in comfort, just in peace. Some stories begin with thunder, others begin with silence, and a single act of kindness. This one began on a porch, with a quiet man who didn't ask questions, and 3 girls who carried more scars than belongings. Jack Hale didn't set out to become a father, or a hero, or even a savior. He just opened his door and kept it open, even when trouble came riding in. And Joelle? She didn't come to be loved. She came to survive. But survival has a way of blooming into something more when soil is steady and the house is finally still. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the weight of Joelle's choices or the courage it took to stand when the law looked away, drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? What part of the story stayed with you? And if you believe family isn't made by blood, but by who stays, fights, and mends alongside you, then like this video, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories where grit meets grace. This is Wild West Stories, where even the hardest past can find softer land to grow again. We'll see you on the next ride. The wind cut low through the canyon, dragging dust like old secrets across the rocks. Silas Rourke rode slow, his saddle creaking beneath him, one hand loose on the reins, the other resting near the rifle across his thigh. Beside him padded a wolf-colored dog with eyes too knowing for a beast. Ash, the only living soul Silas trusted anymore. They weren't headed anywhere in particular. Men like Silas didn't go home. They just kept moving, trying to outwalk whatever they'd done to earn their silence. But Ash stopped cold near a dry creek bed, nose high, ears twitching. He barked once, short, sharp, certain. Silas dismounted, hand tightening on the rifle. She was barely visible, curled in the shadow of a broken cottonwood. Dress torn to ribbons, skin the color of smoke and bruises. Her breath was shallow, barely there. A mark burned into her wrist caught the last of the sun. Not a brand, but something older, deliberate. Silas didn't ask questions. He lifted her carefully and placed her across the saddle. Ash walked beside them, quiet and sure. He didn't know her name, where she'd come from, or who had left her for dead. But something told him, this girl wasn't done yet. The dog moved first. Ash's nose twitched in the dry wind, black fur bristling as he veered from the trail and trotted toward a cluster of broken boulders half buried in the canyon floor. Silas Rourke pulled his mare to a slow stop, watching the animal's gait shift into something cautious, something urgent. Ash didn't chase birds. He didn't bark at wind. If the dog was moving like that, something was wrong. Silas dismounted in silence, rifle across his back, boots crunching lightly over scattered gravel. The sun had already started to drop behind the western ridge, drawing long shadows that carved the desert into bones. He followed Ash, each step heavier than the last, until the dog stopped at the edge of a shallow crevice. That's when he saw her. A girl, or woman, rather, crumpled beneath a shelf of stone, her limbs tangled like someone had tossed her there. Her dress was nearly shredded, the hemline burned and the sleeves torn to the elbow. Dirt crusted her face, blood dried at the corner of her mouth, and one bare foot had a cruel gash across the arch. She looked more like something unearthed than someone alive. But Ash whined low and nudged her shoulder. She stirred. Silas dropped to one knee. He pressed the back of his hand beneath her nose. A breath, shallow but there. Her eyelids fluttered once, revealing eyes green as moss in deep woods, then fell shut again. He didn't speak. He wasn't the speaking kind. Instead, he scooped her into his arms. She was light, too light, the kind of thin that only came from being starved of food and mercy. Ash trotted ahead again, tail low and stiff, guiding the way back through the canyon like he knew she belonged somewhere beyond the dirt. Silas placed her in the saddle, tied her in carefully with rope from his bedroll, then walked beside the mare for the next 4 miles. He took her to the only shelter he had, an old hunting shack, long forgotten and barely standing, nestled in the cottonwoods along a dry creek bed. By the time they arrived, dusk had bled into true night. Crickets had begun their songs and bats wheeled above the trees like silent ghosts. Inside the shack, Silas laid her on the cot he hadn't used in months. Ash curled immediately beside her, muzzle pressed to her side. She didn't wake, not even when he cleaned the blood from her feet with boiled water, or when he stitched the gash on her ankle with thread meant for saddlebags. He poured whiskey into the wounds. Her body flinched, but she made no sound. Silas watched her face. There were no words to explain what moved behind those bruises, but he knew pain when he saw it, and this woman had worn it longer than most. He sat near the hearth with his rifle across his lap, the fire crackling low. Ash never left her side. She didn't speak until the second morning. Her voice was a breath, a thread pulled through dry cloth. "Where am I?" Silas stood slowly and poured her a tin cup of water. "Safe," he said and offered it. She took it with shaking hands, drank, and closed her eyes again. By the third day, she was able to sit up. She still hadn't said her name. "You remember anything?" he asked, squatting beside the cot. She shook her head, but something about the way her fingers curled into the blanket said otherwise. "Got a mark on you," he said. She hesitated, then turned her wrist to show him. There, just below the palm, was a pale, circular burn. Not like a brand, but ritualistic. It was familiar. Silas stared, quiet. He'd seen that mark before, years ago, pressed into a wax seal on a letter. The name had been different back then, and the promise too. He hadn't thought about it in a decade. "You ever been to Missouri?" he asked. She blinked. "I don't know." He didn't press. Some stories only came when the fire was low and the air too heavy to fight. She healed slow, ate little, slept with her fists clenched. But she watched everything. Ash, the trees, the way Silas moved through the shack. She never asked why he'd helped her. But one morning, she stood near the door, wrapped in one of his old coats, the belt cinched around her waist. Her hair was still tangled, her face still pale, but there was a kind of clarity in her eyes now. "You got a name?" he asked. She looked toward the light spilling through the crooked doorframe. "Mira," she said. "Mira Thorne." Silas nodded once. "You sure?" "No," she whispered. "But it's what feels like mine." A silence passed between them, not awkward, just real. Then Mira stepped forward, her bare feet silent against the boards. "I think I was supposed to find you." Ash stood and whined softly. Silas didn't reply. He only looked at the fire and the way it caught the edges of her hair like dusk falling through broken windows. Out there, somewhere, something had nearly broken her, but not all the way. And Silas knew one thing for certain. Whatever had come for Mira Thorne, it hadn't finished the job. Mira stood with her arms extended, shoulders tight, jaw locked. The revolver in her grip was heavier than it looked, cold and unfamiliar, despite how naturally her fingers curled around the handle. Silas stood behind her, his voice low even. "Breathe out before you pull," he said. "Not after." Before? She did, then pulled the trigger. The tin can clattered off the fence post, dented and spinning in the dust. Ash barked once in approval from where he sat in the shade of a mesquite tree. Mira lowered the revolver, exhaling hard. Her hands trembled, just barely, but not from fear, from memory. "You've done this before," Silas said, watching her. It wasn't a question. "I think I have," she replied. "My body knows it, but my mind feels like someone else's story." Silas didn't push. He never did. That week, the rhythm settled in. Shoot, eat, rest, think. Mira practiced each morning with Silas, honing a skill she didn't remember learning. Her feet grew steady in the dust. Her aim sharpened. She adjusted her own grip before he corrected it. By the third day, she was hitting bottles, not just cans. By the fifth, she was shooting blind from the hip. "I want to know what I was before," she said one evening, scrubbing a pan clean by the creek. Silas stirred the fire, eyes fixed on the flames. "You'll know when it's time." She looked at him across the firelight. "Or I'll die before it ever comes back." He didn't answer, but Ash shifted closer to her, resting his head against her boot like a quiet vow. They found the corpse on the seventh day. Ash led them to it, muzzle low, gait tense. It was just past the ridge trail, beneath the outcrop where vultures circled. A man face down, one boot missing, his back bloodied by a single shot. Buzzards had gotten to him, but not enough to hide what he carried. A coin. Mira crouched and plucked it from the man's vest pocket. It was flat, blackened metal, etched crudely with a symbol, circle over cross. A mark Silas recognized, and Mira clearly did too. Her fingers went still. "I know this," she whispered. Silas waited. She turned the coin over slowly. "They gave these to the men who kept us, who bought and sold." She stood, breath unsteady. "This one was one of them." "You remember?" Silas asked. "Not his name, just his silence." Her voice tightened. "He never looked at me. Not once." She stared out toward the horizon, lips pressed into a hard line. Then she said, "I remember the one who handed me over." Ash growled low, ears flat. Mira turned to Silas. "It was my father." The words hit like iron. Silas didn't flinch, but inside something old shifted, a knot of rage wrapped in pity. He knew betrayal, but not like that. Mira dropped the coin in the dust. "His name was Eldon Thorne." Silas's jaw clenched. The surname confirmed what he'd suspected since she said Mira. He didn't say anything, but she caught the flicker in his eyes. "You know it?" she asked. "I've heard it," he replied slow. "Landowners, eastern edge of Sundown County. Politics, old blood." "Old rot," she muttered. "He sold me to cover a debt, signed me away like livestock." Silas didn't move. He didn't need to. The fire in her voice said enough. "I want to find them," she said. "The ones who bought me. The ones who ran the camps. Him. All of them." Silas nodded once. "Then we ride." They packed light. Mira insisted on carrying her own gear, including the revolver Silas had cleaned for her. She wore his old coat, still too big, and tied her hair back with a strip of leather cut from the saddlebag. Ash trotted beside her, tail stiff, as if he understood the gravity of what was beginning. Their first stop was a town whispered in campfire talk. Dust Whip, a place where no lawman stayed past sundown. A dry basin where rumors went to die, and the worst kinds of men passed through with coin and blood on their hands. Silas had only been once, years ago, long enough to know it was the kind of place the sundown riders would use as a staging ground. The ride took 2 days. Mira barely spoke, focused on the land, the sky, the shifting trails. She didn't ask for rest, didn't flinch at coyotes or the snap of branches, just rode. On the second night, they camped near an abandoned sheepfold. Mira built the fire herself, placed stones tight for a cook pot, and set her gun within arm's reach before sitting down. "You trust me with this?" she asked, nodding at the weapon. "I wouldn't ride with you if I didn't." She smiled faintly, then turned back to the fire. "You know what I think?" she said quietly. Silas looked up from the map he'd drawn in the dirt. "What's that?" "I think I was supposed to find you." He didn't respond. "I think Ash knew before either of us did." Silas followed her gaze to the dog, already asleep near the saddle packs. She watched the embers rise. "I don't know what we'll find in Dust Whip, but I don't want to be afraid of it anymore." He folded his arms, voice steady. "You won't be." That night, Silas dreamed of Missouri, of a girl's name burned into a letter, of a seal that matched the scar now on Mira's wrist. The old promise, the one he'd buried long ago, came back to him like a ghost. When dawn came, Mira was already saddling her mare. Ash paced near the edge of the bluff, ears alert. "Let's go," she said. Silas mounted up without a word. The wind carried dust ahead of them, swirling it like ash on the breeze. Dust Whip was waiting, and Mira Thorne wasn't running anymore. Dust Whip wasn't a town, it was a scar. Buildings leaned like drunks, half of them scorched black from old fires. A broken sign swung above the general store, the letters barely legible. Children didn't laugh here. Dogs didn't bark. The air carried the dry, sour stench of old whiskey, gunpowder, and sweat. Mira rode in ahead of Silas, her chin up, shoulders square. Ash trotted beside her, hackles raised. The revolver on her hip gleamed in the sun, polished and ready. The only sound was the creak of leather and the soft rhythm of hooves on cracked ground. At the edge of town, an old man sat hunched outside a barber shop, blade stropping against a worn belt. He didn't look up. "You lost?" he rasped as they passed. "No," Mira said without slowing. "I'm looking." Dust Whip's saloon was the only building with music, if you could call it that. Off-key piano, muffled by thick walls and thicker smoke. Two horses were tied outside, one branded with a symbol Silas recognized. A crude circle burned into the flank, same as the coin. "They're here," he said under his breath. Inside, the saloon was darker than it should have been for midday. A few men hunched over their drinks, others at a corner table playing cards. A girl, maybe 16, was sweeping broken glass near the stairs. When Mira stepped in, all eyes lifted, then fell quiet. She walked straight to the bar and dropped the black coin onto the wood. The bartender's hand froze mid-wipe. "Where's the man who carries these?" she asked. The barkeep swallowed. "Don't know what you mean." Silas stepped up behind her. "That'd be a shame. Lying, I mean." Ash let out a low growl. The barkeep glanced toward the back. "Second door. Through the curtain." Mira didn't wait. She pushed through the beaded drape and into a back room that smelled of mildew and secrets. A man looked up from a map on the wall. Thin, nervous, greasy hair slicked back. His coat was gambler's cut, dusty from travel. He reached for something under the table, but Mira had her gun drawn first. "Sit still," she said. Silas stayed in the doorway, shotgun leveled. "You Fletcher Bragg?" Mira asked. The man blinked. "Who's asking?" She stepped forward. "The girl you sold." His face went pale. "I don't know what you mean. I was 13. You told my father I'd fetch more coin than land ever would. You handed me off to riders with blood on their hands." Fletcher looked from Mira to Silas, then to Ash, who growled again, teeth bared. "Look," Fletcher stammered. I didn't touch you. I just brokered deals. I didn't choose where they took you." "You profited," Mira said coldly. "That's all I need to know." Wait. The riders, they're camped west of here. Old creek bed by the charcoal cliffs. They move every week. You won't find them if—" She hit him with her revolver butt, hard enough to crack bone. He collapsed to the floor with a grunt, holding his jaw. "Stay down," Silas warned. They left without a word. Outside, the girl with the broom was still sweeping. She stared at Mira with wide, hollow eyes. "What's your name?" Mira asked. The girl blinked. "Don't got one." "You do now," Mira said. "Go home, or go north. Don't stay here." The girl hesitated, then dropped the broom and ran. They rode hard to the charcoal cliffs, Ash leading. The trail wound through dead mesquite and twisted rock. As they crested a ridge, smoke curled in the distance. Campfires. Mira slowed. Her face was calm. Too calm. "You sure?" Silas asked. She didn't answer. Just dismounted and unstrapped the rifle he'd given her last week. Ash took off through the brush. They moved like ghosts, downwind, silent. The camp below was small, 6 men, maybe more. 2 wagons, a pair of women chained near a cold cookpot, knees drawn tight, eyes blank. Mira's grip on the rifle tightened. She looked at Silas. "They're mine." He nodded once. "I'll cover the back." She crouched low, creeping between stones, waiting until 2 of the men wandered toward the fire with mugs in hand. She shot the first clean through the head. The second spun, shouting, before another shot took him in the chest. Panic spread like oil on flame. Silas's shotgun roared from the rear. Ash darted through the camp, snarling, sinking his teeth into a man's calf and dragging him down. Mira moved with precision. No wasted bullets, no hesitation. One man ran. She caught him in the thigh, then walked up and finished it close. Only one was left. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands, backing toward the fire. "Wait, I know you. You're Thorne's daughter. You were dead." "Wrong," she said. "I lived." "You don't understand. Your father, he made us do it. August Greer bought the papers, the land, all of it. Your death was signed and sealed in court. Greer's the one who owns it all now." Mira lowered her gun, then shot him in the heart. She stood there, breathing hard. The fire crackled behind her, lighting the chains of the two surviving women. Silas approached, Ash dusting his coat. "You all right?" he asked. Mira didn't answer right away. Then, "No, but I will be." They burned the camp, freed the women, buried the dead. Mira didn't flinch once. Not at the smoke, not at the screams, not at the weight of it all. Later, as the embers cooled, she sat with Ash by her side and said, "Greer." Silas nodded. "St. Ellison." She stood. "Then that's where we ride." The wind turned sour as they approached St. Ellison, a town too polished for its sins. The kind of place that smiled with clean windows and swept porches, while rotting at the roots. Mira rode with her shoulders squared, eyes locked ahead. Silas walked beside the horse, rifle in hand, and Ash stayed close, tail low, hackles up. It had taken them 2 days to get there. 2 long, silent nights. Greer's name had echoed in Mira's head like an unanswered question. Now she wasn't asking anymore. She'd come for answers, and if none were offered, she'd take them. At the town's edge, they passed a church with a golden cross, too bright for the dust around it. Across from it stood the courthouse, tall and stone-faced. Mira dismounted and tied the reins to a post. Her fingers trembled only once, and then stilled. "You sure about this?" Silas asked, voice low. She nodded. "This place buried me once. Time I dug myself out." They entered the courthouse just before dusk. The clerk behind the records desk was a narrow man with thinning hair and spectacles smudged with ink. "Can I help you?" he asked without looking up. Mira stepped forward. "I'm looking for land deeds transferred after the spring of '73, under the name Thorne." That made him pause. "First name?" "Mira," he blinked. "Deceased." "Wrong," she said, dead calm. "I'm standing right here." The clerk swallowed hard and began sorting through a stack of ledgers. Mira watched him like a hawk watches a snake in dry grass. Finally, he found it. A folded sheet, the ink still sharp despite the years. Her name had been crossed out, marked as deceased, and next to it was a notarized signature. August Greer. The land had been transferred, legally sealed, and sold to the county before being released, back to Greer himself. A tidy theft. She stared at the seal. A snake curled around a dagger. Greer's family crest. The same one she'd seen burned into a wax seal in another life. "I want copies of everything," Mira said. The clerk didn't argue. They walked out with the documents under Mira's arm. Her jaw was locked, eyes forward. No tremble now, only the slow rise of something colder than anger. Ash barked once, soft, alert. Silas scanned the street. Bragg. Across the square, Fletcher Bragg stepped out of a saloon, his left hand still in a sling. 2 hired guns flanked him, his face twisted into something between recognition and disdain when he spotted them. "Well," Bragg drawled, "if it ain't the ghost girl." Silas raised the rifle an inch. "You want to run? Do it now." Bragg chuckled. No, I figure I've run far enough." Mira stepped forward. "You sold me." He shrugged. "I sold a name. Didn't know she'd claw her way back." Ash growled. The crowd along the boardwalks began to still. "You're going to tell me who paid you," Mira said. Bragg tilted his head. "You think I'm afraid of you now? You're just a girl with a grudge." She didn't speak, just reached into her coat and pulled out one of the silver coins they'd found on the sundown rider. The mark glinted in the fading light, circle over cross. Bragg's smile dropped. "You know that symbol," Mira said. "You knew where they were taking me." Bragg took a step back. "I didn't give the order," he said quickly. "I just delivered the message. Greer made the deal. Your father gave the blessing. I was just the man with the wagon." Silas stepped between them and leveled the rifle at Bragg's chest. "Inside. Now." They pushed Bragg into the sheriff's office, empty at this hour. Mira slammed the door behind them, locked it, and turned. "I want names," she said, "and I want to know where August Greer is right now." Bragg's shoulders sagged. "He's got a place 10 miles out, in the hills. Calls it Elm Rest. Real pretty. All stone and stained glass. Hides the rot well." "You're taking us there," Silas said. Bragg shook his head. "You don't need me. Mira stepped forward, her face inches from his. Listen close. If I see you flinch, lie, or breathe wrong, you'll never see sunrise again. Bragg's mouth worked, then stilled. He nodded. That night they rode in silence. Bragg led the way, his hands bound to the saddle horn. Mira rode with the documents pressed to her chest, the weight of her stolen name heavier than steel. Elmhurst appeared at midnight, lit by oil lamps and moonlight. It looked more church than ranch. Arched doorways, a weather vane shaped like a cross. Greer stepped out onto the balcony in a velvet robe, cup in hand. His silver hair caught the light like ash. "Riding late, aren't you?" he called. Mira dismounted. She didn't answer. She walked up the steps, pulled the papers from her coat, and threw them at his feet. "You forged me dead. You stole what wasn't yours." Greer sipped his drink. "I corrected a mistake." "You mean my birth?" He smiled. "Something like that." Behind her, Silas and Ash stood still, watching the wind. Greer said, "You should have stayed buried. It would have saved us both the embarrassment." Mira raised her gun. Greer's eyes flicked to it. "I'm not afraid to die," he said. "No," she replied. "You're just afraid to lose." She shot him once, clean through the chest. He fell backward into the doorway. The glass shattered around him like the lie he'd built. Inside, servants screamed. Bragg stood pale as snow. Mira turned to him. "You're next if you run." He didn't move. They searched the study, found letters, records, even maps. Names signed in ink that smelled fresh, including one she recognized, Eldon Thorne, her father. "Found your Judas," Silas said quietly. Mira stared at the paper for a long time. Then she rolled it tight and set it in her coat. By dawn, Elmhurst burned. Mira stood beside Silas on the hilltop, the fire painting their faces in red and gold. "I took my name back," she said. "No," Silas said. "You reclaimed what they feared you'd remember." She looked down at Ash. The dog wagged once. "We're not done," she said. "No," Silas agreed, "but we're closer than we were yesterday." And with that, they rode east toward the next shadow, toward the place where a yellow ribbon once vanished into the dark. Stonewater wasn't on most maps, and maybe that was on purpose. The road thinned the closer they got, until it wasn't a road at all, just a track worn by hooves and ghosts. Mira rode with her jaw tight, eyes flicking over every ridge and ravine. Ash sniffed the wind like it whispered things he couldn't ignore. Silas said little, but his hand never strayed far from the rifle slung across his shoulder. They reached the outskirts by dusk. The sun hit the horizon like a fist, bleeding into the earth. Stonewater emerged from the dust like a broken tooth. Tilted roofs, leaning shacks, chimneys that hadn't smoked in years. No laughter, no children's cries, just the groan of rusted metal in the wind. "They say the mine's dried out," Silas muttered. Mira's gaze swept the empty buildings. "Then they're selling something else." Ash growled low as they passed a shack with barred windows. A man stood on the porch, watching them with eyes as flat as stone. He didn't nod, didn't blink, just watched. Inside the town's only saloon, the lanterns were dim, and the air smelled of sweat and copper. Mira walked in first, shoulders squared, her coat still streaked with soot from Elmhurst's fire. The bartender glanced up but said nothing. His hands never stopped moving, polishing a glass that looked clean enough to eat from. "We're looking for a girl," Mira said. 11. Name's Tally Boone." The bartender's eyes twitched. A glass slipped. "Don't know her." Mira leaned in. "Try again." He looked toward the corner table. Two men sat there, both with pistols on their belts and badges on their vests. But these weren't lawmen. Not the kind that upheld justice. More like the kind that ensured silence. One of them stood. "You're not from here." "No," Silas said, stepping beside Mira. "We're not." "Then I suggest you ride out the same way you came." Mira's voice cut through the room. "I suggest you sit down before I remind you what fear feels like." The man didn't move, but his jaw ticked. "She's here," Mira said, "and I'm not leaving without her." "You think this town gives a damn what you want?" "No," Mira said, "but I think you know what happens when people like me stop asking." There was a beat of silence. Then the second man muttered, Back shack behind the old mill. The first growled. Shut up, Hendry. She's just a kid, Hendry said. Let it be done. The first man scowled but didn't stop them. They found the shack just past a broken wheelbarrow and a dog skeleton picked clean. Mira kicked the door in. The room stank of mildew and soap. A small girl sat on the floor, stitching a piece of sackcloth into a crooked doll. She didn't scream, just looked up with hollow eyes. Tally? Mira crouched. The girl blinked. Her face was too thin, her lips cracked. You said my name. You remember me? Mira whispered. You had dark hair, Tally said, and they tied your hands like mine. Mira's breath caught. Not anymore. Silas stood at the door, rifle up. Ash slipped inside and pressed his head to the girl's shoulder. She didn't flinch. Just dropped the doll and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, like he was the only real thing in the room. Mira lifted Tally in her arms. We're leaving. That's when the first shot rang out. It didn't miss. It was a warning. A bullet embedded itself into the wooden frame above Mira's shoulder. Another shot followed, this one ricocheting off the metal stove behind them. Silas dragged a table across the door. They knew we'd come, he muttered. Guards? Mira asked. No, he said grimly. Worse. Look through a crack in the window. Mira saw them. 4 men in dark coats, their faces half covered, rifles slung low. Each wore a patch, circle over cross, the mark of the Sundown Riders. But their gear was newer now, polished, organized. These weren't roaming mercenaries. These were contracted, waiting. They're not here for the town, Silas said. They're here for you. Mira's stomach turned. They knew my name. They knew your path, he corrected. Someone sent them ahead. Mira looked at Tally. The girl was trembling in her arms. We have maybe a minute, Silas said. Mira reached into her coat, hands steady despite the thunder in her chest. She pulled out the silver coin, the Sundown Rider's old token. Maybe this buys us a lie. Silas blinked. You sure they still follow the coin? No, Mira whispered. But I know someone's paying them now, and they'll care more about silver than blood if we sell it right. She stepped out just enough to let the firelight glint off the coin in her raised hand. She's marked, Mira called. Girls under contract, interfere, and the ones who branded her will skin you for it. The riders hesitated. One of them shouted back, Who gave the mark? Mira didn't blink. Fletcher bragged, and he's still got friends in the hills. A long pause. Then one of the men spat into the dirt and muttered something to the others. They backed off. Silas watched in disbelief. That bluff won't hold forever. It doesn't need to, Mira said, mounting fast with Tally in her arms. It just has to get her out. They rode hard, the riders never following, but Mira knew that wasn't mercy. It was tactics. They weren't finished with her. Not yet. The wind carried ash and thunder. Mira watched the trail behind them. Empty for now, but her gut said that peace was only borrowing time. They'd crossed too many lines, not just local thugs or cowards in uniforms. They had embarrassed someone powerful. Silas rode beside her, quiet. Tally slept in the saddle between them, her small body pressed against Mira's back, the yellow ribbon limp in her hair. We need to lay low, he said finally, but not too low. Mira's jaw clenched. You think Bragg or Greer were the top? Silas shook his head. I think they were the gatekeepers. Whoever held their leash hasn't pulled yet. That night they found shelter in a half-burned chapel west of Hollow Creek. Mira sat by the altar, watching the shadows stretch and shift with each flicker of flame. Tally lay curled under Ash's fur, the dog's chest rising slow and steady. Silas tossed another log on the fire. She's not just a girl anymore, he said quietly. She's the reason, Mira replied. They both knew what that meant. It wasn't about revenge now. It was about building something that lasted, something better. The next morning, as the frost lifted from the grass, a man approached the chapel on foot. He didn't carry a rifle, just a wide-brimmed hat, dust-covered boots, and a look that said he had nothing left to lose. Silas stood first, hand on his belt. I ain't armed, the man said, raising both hands. Mira stepped into the doorway, Tally behind her. You've got 5 seconds to explain, she said. Name's Colt Waverly. I heard about what you did in Stonewater. My town's got girls missing too. Boys too. Nobody talks. Sheriff's paid off. I came to ask, his voice cracked, if you're really the ones who stop this sort of thing. Mira didn't blink. We are. Colt's shoulders dropped. He reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a crumpled paper. A list of names, ages, dates. My daughter's on here, he said. So's my neighbor's niece. Last seen headed west with a preacher's wagon. Said they were promised work. Never came back. Mira took the paper. Her stomach turned. These people, she whispered, they don't sell girls for greed. They do it for structure, for silence, for control. Silas crossed his arms. And someone up top is making sure it keeps running. Colt nodded. They call themselves the Golden Doctrine. Sounds righteous. But it's blood money behind velvet curtains. I got one name. A man who funds their routes, helps clean up records. August Greer with small potatoes. This one's bigger. Who? Mira asked. Colt looked up. Eldon Thorne. The name stopped her cold. Silas noticed. You know him? She nodded once, like each inch of movement cost her breath. He's my father, Colt blinked. He's part of the doctrine? No, Mira said darkly. He helped build it. Silas stepped forward. You said your name was Mira Thorne when I found you. It is, but I was buried under that name too. Eldon signed my death certificate, sold my mother's land, paid men like Bragg to disappear me. And now he's in charge? Silas asked. Mira turned toward the fading sun. He's a figurehead. Greer worked through him, but Eldon knows where the bones are buried. Tally came up beside her, eyes wide. Are we going to stop him too? Mira knelt, brushing a hair from her face. We're going to stop all of them, but this time we don't do it alone. Silas looked between them. You thinking what I'm thinking? She stood, voice hardening. We don't need revenge. We need witnesses. We need truth. We need noise. Colt stepped forward, voice trembling. You want help? You'll bleed beside us, Mira said. No coin, just cause. Colt nodded. Where do we start? She pulled out the coin, the same one she'd used to bluff the riders. She tossed it in the fire. We start with a name, she said. A symbol, something they can't silence. Silas cocked his head. What'll we call it? Mira looked down at the scar on her wrist. The circle burned still red beneath her sleeve. Red thread, she said. We pull it till the whole damn thing unravels. They rode the next day, not as fugitives, as founders. People they'd freed had started leaving marks, painted signs on fences, lanterns lit at dawn, red ribbons tied to chapel doors. It wasn't an army, not yet, but it was enough, just enough to make the powerful feel uneasy, just enough to give the stolen a place to return, just enough to give Mira Thorne a new name, whispered on the wind like warning. The girl who didn't stay dead. The sky never spoke, but tonight it listened. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Mira Thorne, Silas Rourke, and a girl named Tally ride beneath a blood-orange sun. 3 souls bound by silence, vengeance, and something even older. Justice earned, not given. They were never supposed to survive, but they did. And now, others are starting to follow the thread. Because stories like this one don't end. They echo. If this tale stirred something in you, let us know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or town below. We love seeing how far the red thread stretches. What would you do if justice rode into your town? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Wild West stories where the gun speaks, but the truth roars louder. The war's not over, and neither are we.